In this short presentation, I will try to introduce some generic business strategies. These generic strategies could be distinctly understood in terms of two competitive dimensions. These dimensions are the source of competitive advantage and the scope of operations. Let me explain a little more. The number one dimension is source of competitive advantage. What gives you competitive advantage? Something that comes to mind immediately is the cost. If you can make something at a lower cost, you can sell it at a lower price, which automatically gives you a competitive advantage. So cost is a source of competitive advantage. If you can make something in a differentiated way in comparison with your competition, if your competition is making very generic products or services, whereas you are making something that is differentiated, that is a basis of competitive advantage. So when we talk about the source of competitive advantage, we are trying to understand where does it stem from. The second dimension of competitiveness is the scope of your operations. Is the entire world your market, or are you catering to a specific customer segment, specific geographical segment, specific segment of any kind? So the question is whether you are targeting all possible customers or whether you are focusing on the unique needs of a smaller segment or smaller segments of your customers. So when you take these two dimensions, that is your scope of operations and the source of competitive advantage, you can think about certain generic strategies. One of them I already mentioned, cost leadership. Cost leadership is a strategy that gives you an advantage because of lower cost. And the name that comes to my mind immediately is Walmart. Walmart is a world leader in cost leadership. The cost leadership generic strategy enables manufacturers or businesses or firms that produce products or services with an acceptable level of quality and features to a broad set of customers at a lower price. So cost leadership is often leveraged by means of economies of scale. What that means is that if you can produce a larger amount of any product, the unit cost of production is likely to be low. So cost leadership is often achieved by your ability to sell the product to a vast number, a large number of customers. You may not be able to achieve cost leadership if you are trying to sell to like 15 or 20 of customers that really want your product. So the economies of scale is the principle that is the driving force, driver of cost leadership. Economies of scale exists when the cost of offering goods and services decreases as the firm is able to sell more and more items. Expenses are distributed across a greater number of items, which make the cost per unit of item is lower. So we are trying to understand generic strategies based on the basis of competence and the scope of your operations. Cost leadership, according to these two criteria, these two dimensions, is possible when the basis of your competitive advantage is lower cost and your scope of operations is large. Another generic strategy that could be derived based on these two dimensions is what is called differentiation. A differentiation strategy is a generic strategy that attempts to convince customers to pay you a higher price because you offer a differentiated product or service. You are asking a premium price because you offer something uniquely desirable to the customers. Using this strategy, a firm can compete based on uniqueness rather than price alone. Price is still important, but price is not the only factor, and price is not the major most factor. So differentiation strategy is the second alternative. Cost leadership is not always sustainable, not always possible. Firms can rather differentiate if they can add some extra value over the cost leader and find a place in the competitive spectrum.